Today we are taking a look at Ancestral Weapons. This is a PDF that I bought from DMsGuild for $4.95. These are weapons that essentially, long story short, they're weapons that may have been given to you, passed down through generations, your bloodline. The weapon that was over the mantelpiece that you always witnessed when you were a little kid and you heard the legends of your father wielding that weapon. You heard about how he was a dragon hunter or something to that nature. Never talked about it much. And in his last breaths, before he died, he took that weapon off the mantelpiece and he handed it to you. So it's been passed down. This is something that might have some ceremonial value to you, sentimental value, weapons of that nature that have good roleplay and backstory. But what these rules do, and what's so beautiful about it, is it bridges the gap between you have these awesome roleplay, backstory, fan fiction, the type of iconic things we know when we see weapons in movies. You have the Blades of Chaos from Kratos. You have Gandalf's staff. You have the glaive from Krull. You have Conan's sword. You have Cloud's Buster sword from Final Fantasy. You have other things from Lord of the Rings. You've got Aragorn's weapon. You have Sting, of course. You've got the iconic, the juggernaut of them all. You have the lightsabers from Star Wars. So there's these iconic weapons, Stormbringer, Elric, and Michael Moorcock's works. Things like that. You have these iconic weapons that, as characters coming into D&D, we always want this stuff. We always wish we could wield something as powerful as, by the power of Grayskull, or whatever the hell He-Man says. And you've got the sword that Lion-O was holding when he's going to get ready to fight Mum-Ra and all this other stuff. And the bow that was drawn back in the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon that didn't have any ammo that you needed to have. And these iconic things. And when you come up with something that epic and you have a backstory of this was my father's, or this was handed to me during a ancient ritual of my god and my faith, and it's some ceremonial warhammer. The cool thing about that is it holds a lot of value to you, but where does it fit in mechanically? What happens when you move through the levels and what's on the character sheet, the things that matter that help you roll your dice or help you in combat when it gets down to initiative timing, the other players start to outshine you. And eventually, you might kind of put that ceremonial sword, it looks good, it's beautiful, it has a lot of value to you, and it means a lot in the backstory and history of your character, but you put it on your back quite simply because the +2 longsword, which is just a +2 longsword, you bought it somewhere or you looted it from some random goblin, it seems to be better because it gives you +2 on the die roll. This bridges that gap. It gives you some rules and some charts that you can roll on to help create some backstory and legend to these things, but then it has this wonderful system of currency known as spirit points. And by spending spirit points, you can Diablo-ish, you can video game these weapons, roleplay style, where you can increase the power of the weapons. You can give them various traits and attributes and special powers as you level up. And it does a good job of sort of wrangling that stuff in and also giving you sort of level recommendations, things that help keep it balanced so that it seems to grow in power with you. Essentially, once you get this cool weapon that was handed down along the bloodline from your grandfather to your father to you, you'll never want to search out another weapon again. Let's take a look at it. We have 31 pages of goodness for $4.95. Ancestral Weapons is something I bought on DMsGuild is what it's called. It's a PDF that I downloaded. I got it this morning. It's a relatively new product, I believe, maybe within a week. Created by Dungeon Rollers and Matt Vaughn. And you've got a good layout here. Let's look at just the visuals and aesthetic of a thing very quickly. The font is well laid out. It's beautiful. It's easily read. It has a lot of detail that you want to, words. There's a lot of paragraphs here. So it's paramount that you don't get too flashy and staying too much. I've said this in other reviews. This is Graphic Design 101 from the experience of a graphic designer for 25 plus years. You don't want to have what we would equate to Old English or calligraphy and beautiful, like this A right here. Okay, that's beautiful. It fits within the fantasy aesthetic, but you don't want that to be the dominant font or text that's used within your piece because it's not readable. We need something that's familiar. This looks like novel sort of font and text. We can navigate our way through this very easily. It uses good colors. It's nothing obnoxious. It has a good bold sort of font usage here to indicate what section you're in. As we scroll through, There's not a ton of artwork, but where it is, it's top-notch, cream of the crop, best of the best. It does not get any better. There's a few pieces of artwork which I'll show you with the different weapons, and they are of the highest professional quality. Here you have just a cool little piece of artwork of, showing the significance of how important that blade must be to that knight in helping him defeat that dragon. Unless you're playing monks, blades are important. Now, before I get into too many of the other details on it, when we're talking weapons, it seems to appeal to the 5th edition characters that are martial classes, right? Your fighters and your paladins, barbarians, and whatnot. There are some attributes on weapons that help with spells, giving you spell slots and various things like that. So these could be weapons that could appeal to those that aren't really swinging in melee combat, because there are staves and things of that nature. So this does apply, and it is beneficial to all characters. But the meat and potatoes, the core of it all, is these are weapons that most likely will benefit and be a good benefit to martial classes. So you have these ancestral weapons. It shows you many, many different rules. It tells you that ancestral weapons will always be magical, even if some of their properties aren't active. Okay? Now, how do you activate these things? What are the rules as far as what you require? You can get these ancestral weapons based on some backstory, things that either you as the character will come up with, perhaps some things that you've combined or you've come up with and brainstormed in conjunction with the Dungeon Master. Maybe the Dungeon Master has already created this for you, and he has an ancestral weapon with the accompanying various abilities already put onto it. So you're not really spending any spirit points to level it up. It's already a sort of a fixed weapon that has its checklist of everything already. But these are all things that are handed out through a lot of roleplay and a lot of backstory. There's some significance to it in story. There's an iconic master teacher who passed it down to you. As I said earlier, your father gave it to you, or grandfather gave it to him. Maybe there's just a real long bloodline of orcs that you once came from in your half-orc bloodline, that the king of the orcs used to once wield this spear, and now it's getting passed down to you. It does say that you can find certain things, but the attunement process to it is going to be a little more involved. But it's not generally things that you just sort of find or you buy in the store. These are things that have some significance with your character from the very beginning, and by using these spirit points, you level them up. So it mentions that you might get a spirit point, 1 spirit point per character level. And then through plots and story hooks, which is brilliant, because for the DM in these 31 pages, there's a bunch of little lead-ins here based on the lore of a weapon that can create entire story arcs. They can create an entire reason for your character existing, and it gives your character a mission, a reason why they're adventuring in the world of, I want to unlock the secrets of this blade. So what you'll do is, as you do various quests and things that are fitting within the lore and the theme of where the blade came from, the ancestry and the heritage behind it, you can acquire more spirit points. And as such, spirit points become currency, which you can then spend to unlock various traits. And depending on how many spirit points are sort of spent on the blade and where it is, it will show what sort of rarity the item is. It shows you the step-by-step process, really good layout. As I said, it gives you all of the details. It tells you that there are things such as... So let's just go through it. First, you determine who has an ancestral weapon. They're not appropriate for every character, so not everyone in your party has to have this. Then you decide on what type, of course. So do I have a sword? Do I have a battle axe? Once you start leveling these things up using spirit points, you're kind of going to be, and you should want to be, you're not really going to be getting multiple different ancestral weapons. So pick the weapon type that you think is going to fit and persist through the life of your entire character. So you want to decide on what type of weapon you want. Then you determine what sort of spirit points it starts with. You can start with 0, and as you gain the weapon the first time, maybe you get 1. You can maybe start with 0 and start them off with an initial quest where the first thing they do is they talk with their grandfather who once wielded the weapon to get some backstory and history on it, and maybe that gives you 1 spirit point. And as you go through, you upgrade it and you get more and more spirit points by doing quests, as I said, specific to what's going on with the weapon. As you gain spirit points, you can then use it to buy upgrades. You can simply give this chart to your players and let them sort of run free with it. It gives some recommendations and some limitations. There is an actual trait called limited. You can only have 2 limited upgrades on your spirit weapon or on your ancestral weapon at a time. You can overwrite upgrades. So let's say one upgrade costs you 3, and later on you want a upgrade that is of another level. So you've got, let's say, there's one down here called, let's say, Amplify level 1, and you later want to have Amplify level 2. And Amplify level 1 costs you 3 spirit points, and Amplify level 2 costs you 5 spirit points. What you can do is you can overwrite an upgrade. And you can get rid of level 1, which gives you those points back, which means if level 1 costs 3 and level 2 costs 5, you only need to spend an additional 2 points to upgrade it to Amplify level 2. It does limit you, as I said, with limiting. There are certain upgrades that are called limited. You can only have 2 at a time. There are restrictions on you cannot have 2 upgrades of the same name, even if they're at different levels. You have to buy those. So you can't have Amplify level 1 and Amplify level 2. You would upgrade Amplify level 1, getting rid of the benefits of that and move it up to the next level. And even where you have some that, like you have an upgrade called Overpower, but they're different in each of these subtypes of, there's Brawler Overpower, there's the Brutish Overpower, there's the Dread Overpower, Disarming, which would make sense what you think it might do, there's the Poisonous Overpower. No matter which one you get, you can only have 1 Overpower because the name is considered the same. So you can overwrite, as I said. If the Brawler Overpower, let's just say, let's look at it. The Brawler Overpower costs you 2 spirit points. You cannot then ever get on that same weapon the Brutish Overpower. But what I can do is I can upgrade or swap out where I get that 2 points back, which would allow me to buy this 1 point Brutish one for free. But you just can't have both at the same time. So it does have some limiting things. The other thing it does to limit, most importantly, is it shows you based on level, based on tiers, which relates to what's in the player's handbook. Tier 1 is your character levels between like 1 through 4. Tier 2 are character levels like 5 through 9. Tier 3 is character levels around 10 or 11 all the way up to about 16. And then Tier 4 upgrades are character levels 17 and above. So these upgrades at the level 4, you should not allow your players to have access to and buying those upgrades until they are of those levels. So that way it keeps things balanced and level appropriate, depending on what items of non-ancestral nature other players in your group have, so they don't feel like these, the ancestral weapons don't feel so powerful that it's like, why would I want any other weapon but an ancestral weapon? You know what I mean? Things like that. And of course, relative to the power level of, you don't want these high-level upgrades to be available when your characters are only level 6, and they're making the spellcasters in your party completely seem useless because these upgrades are of that power level where they're allowing you to do things that a level 17 spellcaster might do. And of course, as you get higher level, the upgrades are going to cost more spirit points. So there is also that stopgap, that limiting bottleneck right there, in that you're only able to purchase and acquire the upgrades if you have the money, the spirit points for it. And if you're going elsewhere or the story arc is taking you somewhere else and you haven't had time to pursue these various quests that help you gain more spirit points, the only way you're really gaining them is as you level up. It suggests that every time you gain a level, you might gain a spirit point. Now, with spirit points, you can save them. You can accumulate them if you're saving up for something big. So let's just take a look at a few of them. You've got level 1 upgrades. You have the Duelist. That costs 2 spirit points. It will always show you if there are any sort of prerequisites. This applies to melee weapons only, so obviously don't ask for your bow. You'll see some like this where it'll show you Spell Link. This is 2 spellcasters only. As I said in the beginning, there are some things here, even though we're talking weapons, and your wizard is typically not going to be in melee combat or range combat for that matter without using magic. There are some things that just by holding this staff in your hand, you're going to have some cool abilities, which is a good thing. So you have the Duelist. It costs 2 spirit points, melee weapons only, and it's limited, meaning that you can only ever have 2 limited upgrades on your weapon of any type. When you are hit by a melee attack that you can see, you can use your reaction to add 1 to your armor class. Very cool. Let's jump all the way down and take a look at a level 3 upgrade. There's the Duelist, which is the level 3 version. That costs 6 points. Melee weapons only, it's limited. When you are hit by a melee attack that you can see, you can use your reaction to add 3 to your AC. So things of that nature. Do you have to? I don't think there's anything that indicates you have to have the level 1 before you can get the level 2 and the level 2 before you can get the level 3. But remember, as this is a level 3, it's showing you that this is within the tier 3. So your characters should be somewhere at least around level 10 to 11 or higher before you even give them access to this. They may at level 4, depending on how much story and quest they're doing to get spirit points, they might have enough spirit points to purchase this, because it does also say that you shouldn't really let your players ever have the max spirit points they should have would be level +2. So as level 4 characters, they could maybe have max 6 spirit points saved up, and which is enough to buy this. But if you're following the restriction of level 10 or 11 plus before they should access this, you don't give them access to that. Just because what that benefit is, if you were to look at that in the balancing mechanic of things, that's equivalent to, you know, now you're stepping on the toes of some other high-level, very rare magic items, which should only be available for higher-level characters, things of that nature. So you have just numerous things. It's a beautiful system of using spirit points to buy this stuff and just kind of give your characters access to this. All right, folks, I'm back. I apologize. I was starting to reach and obtain some exhaustion levels there. I'm starving, so I got to do what I got to do, folks. These 20-minute things take some time and energy, so I've got some high society, some French-style yogurt here, whatever this is. It's delicious, though. It's good stuff. So besides going out and buying this, go out and buy this. I don't know where the hell you get it, but your normal grocery store, Walmart, Fry's, or something like this. So, let's do it. Okay. Here's another awesome part. These weapons have these sort of passive effects called ancestral traits and personalities. They're not overpowered. They're minor things, but they add so much flavor. I think they're brilliant. What you can do is you can simply roll it. You can, of course, pick them, but you can roll a d20 to randomize. And what this is saying is, let's say I roll a 1. The ancestors will occasionally speak to the bearer, imparting their wisdom. When making an ability check, the player can ask the ancestors for aid. The player gains an additional d4 to add to the skill check, but must complete a short or long rest before using this ability again. Nothing insanely powerful, but just some cool flavor that you're getting some gameplay stuff here. It's helping you, it's giving you a d4, but it's a little more storyline and backstory. Of the other PCs might say, are you talking to your sword, dude? Like, yeah, I think it listens to me and it just helps me when I'm making this decision. You know, learn from failure. When you roll a 1 on the d20 to make a weapon attack, your next weapon attack is made with advantage. That's kind of a big mechanical thing, right? But these are traits. These aren't things that you have to use spirit points for. What you can do is and it says right here very simply, a weapon can have either of the properties presented, meaning an ancestral trait and a personality. It can have both, or it can have none. It just depends on where you want to go with it. And maybe there is a trait, but maybe you equate it to some storyline or some adventure hook that they need to learn more about it. There's this legendary tome written about that sword they have. And until they go and find that library and talk to that NPC and find that book and read about it, these things won't unlock. Not too unlike, almost, they need to acquire the appropriate amount of spirit points to buy this thing. That sort of a thing. So it just has some really neat flavor to give you some traits as to, you know, it's nice to give you a chart versus just talking, these come from ancestors and there's this sentient sort of property to the blade and you can feel that it has the power of those that once wielded it. These give you actual quantifiable things that you can roll and see what they do. And some are just pure flavor. This one, you always know the direction of the closest source of alcohol. Cool. You know, neat stuff. Personalities. When you change your viewpoint easily, a small sense of shame washes over you. When you are presented with the options, the weapon will try to subtly push you in the direction that would see more bloodshed. So these could lead themselves towards a cursed vibe, but it's just little pushes to to constantly remind the player that this blade means something to you, and it's constantly checking up on you to see if you're following the right path. And that could be, these can be like little hints that indicate to your player, dude, where you're going and what you're doing and the way you're, sorry. These could be things where it's just sort of hints where you're indicating to the player based on the personality that where you're going and what you're doing, you're probably not moving towards some new spirit points. You're not going to be gaining any. So if you want those spirit points to upgrade to one of those cool abilities, you need to kind of change your direction a little, because the blade is subtly indicating to you in some way, you just feel it. You just don't feel like the blade and the wielder of a blade would do such an action, that type of thing. So really neat in that regard. It gives you rules, I'm not going to go over them, to how to create non-ancestral weapons. So almost just creating your own magic items. So I want to create a sword and I want to give them various traits. And it shows you, if you were to buy those type of things, how many spirit points would those traits cost should you have them in a character as currency, and what would that cost money-wise. So for each spirit point that you spent, they could be worth 5,000 gold each, that type of thing. And it just shows you a way that you can build your own custom item, but it doesn't have to be attached to the lore and the story of this was passed down from generation to these are the ones that could be looted or something. So it shows you how to create non-ancestral, so weapons that are not specific to the background of a character. It shows you how they can be crafted, based on the crafting rules. It then gives you really cool weapon history, where these are just awesome things that this is purely roleplay. I roll here and it shows you that it was once wielded by a race of orcs, or this is a weapon that has a lineage of bugbears. And then you can see, roll a d6 to see how many generations. So this is like 4 generations of bugbears that once wielded this named great axe. And then it'll show you, based on the number of generations, if we have 4 generations of bugbears that wielded it, we are then going to look in this chart here, and we will have a d4 of number of feats of legend. And then I'll roll 3, let's say I get on the d4, I'm going to roll 3 times on this chart, and it gives me some more story. This weapon was once used to destroy a lich, it was once in the possession of an angel, and it was once part of a ritual to banish a demon. That just gives you more lore and more detail to go with. So when they start probing and asking, hey, if I need to get more spirit points, what do I need to do? Let's deal with something that has to do with that demon, the angel, or the lich. Right? It shows you even physical properties. I can roll for craftsmanship. What is the weapon made of? Who made it? Is this elven made? Is this made by some elemental? That's why it's made of fire. What kind of wood was used? What kind of metal was used? Even an identifying feature. You can roll on that chart to say that this is a weapon of ice, yet it is almost pink in color. Or this is a great sword, but it seems a little larger than your average great sword. You know what I mean? It'll just have different traits that just give it more flavor. So very, very well done. And then you have some cool examples made by like the contributors and the writers, where there's no artwork with them, but these are full, like an entire page of varying levels. So this is called Griffin's Rest, which is a longsword, and it shows you, here's like the uncommon version of it, here's the rare version, here's the very rare, and here's the legendary version of that same Griffin's Rest longsword. So, and it just ends the book with kind of these different writer created cool leveled up items. You've got a short sword here, you have a quarterstaff here, you have the long sword up above, and I like that it shows it to you in the uncommon, rare, very rare, and legendary, different levels. So these are sort of pre-built ones already, which is really neat. And then finally you have an appendix for a crafting table, which kind of helps you and shows you where the spirit point should be and what level this item might be. So there's a lot here. I think the biggest strength on it, best review I can give on it is, I love how it appeals to the players. It gives you something to hold on to that makes you want to progress. It gives you a reason for your character doing what they do. But yet it provides so much reason or direction and fuel for the DM to say, how would my player now acquire those things? What story do I need to come up with? And with those charts of personalities of it and the legends and what, how many generations was this in, how long ago was this crafted, who crafted it, and what legends, what is this sword known for? Like, this is the sword that was once responsible for starting a war, for stopping a war, so on and so forth. Those are fuel for the DM to create adventure hooks that he now presents to the player, and the player can now latch onto those to help him gain spirit points, which is his currency, to upgrade that weapon. So outstanding, very well done. I saw it in one of the reviews already. I can't wait to see the ancestral armor or other things, but in that it gives you some ideas of how to create your own versions. You can certainly take these charts and use them for all sorts of magic items, maybe backpacks or containers or whatever it may be. So awesome religious relics, things like that. So I hope this review kind of highlighted some points of what you're going to get with it, and I hope it informs you and helps you decide whether you feel like this is a good fit for you and your gaming group. As always, thanks for watching, everyone. Take care.